All right. Hey, Facebook. Welcome to the Kingdom Effect. Tuesday, February the 15th. I'm here with Kevin Beasley, and our guest tonight is Leon Simba Hayes. We'll get into where
Simba.
that nickname came from when we get into the interview. But you guys remember we had the contest last week to win that free pint of paint from Jim's store. So, Kevin, why don't you tell everybody who won that contest?
Rumor has it Ken Dillingham won that. That's awesome. Which, by the way, if you guys don't know, this thing sounds really hot. If you guys don't know, the Dillinghams, they have an organization called the Dillingham Group, and they have a really I am honored that they're listening to our podcast because they have a really hot podcast. One of the top podcasts for missional living on Apple or any of the other platforms. So, congratulations, Ken. If y'all have not checked out the Dillingham Group, the podcast is called the Mobilized Church Podcast. And I kind of have to say it like they say it at the beginning, the Mobilized Church Podcast. So that's to you, Chris Dillingham. But Ken, they're two brothers, so Ken is the one that won the quart of paint from Annie Sloan. So we'll get that out to you. Find out what color you want, and that's coming your way, Ken.
All right. So, as you can tell, I am not in the my normal spot that we filmed the show in. Here with my good friend, mentor, Leon Simba Hayes, and I'm in his home. They were gracious to invite me into his home, and it's it's really great because most of my relationship with Leon has been in Kenya in Africa. So it's really great to be a part of his life here in Tennessee in the United States as well. So his lovely wife Brenda, you guys can't see her; she's not on camera, but she's over here listening. So glad to be here.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get started with filming the show and interviewing Leon. So Kevin, do you want to bring us in to and I'll introduce Leon to everyone.
Okay, sounds good. You guys ready? Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Kingdom Effect podcast. I'm here with my buddy Glenn Buckley. I didn't say buckshot this time. So, what's up, Glenn? How's your week been so far?
It has been pretty good so far, even though it is Tuesday. It's
Yeah, right.
it's been good so far. Um, Worked a little bit yesterday, not too much. You'll be happy to know that. Just a couple hours. I actually got to have coffee with my old high school art history teacher.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
got
fun.
to got to catch up with him. Yeah, he's
Cool.
81 years old.
Wow. What is his last name?
Palmer.
Do you call him Mr. Palmer or do you call him by his first name?
I call him Mr. Palmer still
Yeah.
to this day.
It's always hard, when I meet, teachers I had, and some of them I'm close to their age. They were like 5 or 6 years older than me when I had them as teachers, and so it's always weird. Do I call them still Mister and Mrs. or call them by their first name? So you went for the Mister, huh?
Yeah, I mean he's just known as Mr. Palmer. I mean you
All
say
right.
Mr. Palmer in this part of the state and people know
Yeah, that's
exactly who
true.
you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. It's also a cultural thing, where you say Mr. and Mrs., what part of the country. Some people think that's kind of weird, or some people would think that's disrespectful. So it's interesting. In the South, generally, we definitely say Mr. and Mrs. So,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, so tonight, like I said, we're here with Leon Hayes, also known as Simba. Leon and I met probably around 2010, 2011, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then we really got to know each other well when I visited Kenya, where he works in Asimbo Bay. I've been twice now. I went in 2012 and again in 2014. And so, Leon, again, thanks for having us in your home, Leon and Brenda. We're honored to be here and to be talking to you guys and sharing your story. So, I think the first obvious question, Leon, is, man, how did you get called into the mission field, in
The
Asimbo
first
Bay.
obvious
Question,
Oops.
Leon, is
Sorry, my fault. Let's start that over.
so the first obvious question, Leon,
In
is Asimbo
the first
Bay.
obvious.
He did it again.
Welcome to the Kingdom Effect.
Yeah, it's constant technical issues at the Kingdom Effect. So Leon, the first obvious question is, how did you get called into the ministry thousands of miles away in Asimbo Bay, Kenya?
Well, I first went to Kenya in 2005 on a 2-week mission trip, and it seemed to me that it was very successful, and it just I got a feeling that I needed to do this thing, and so I went that time, and then I went again the next year, and I got kind of the call from God that the only way that we could do what we was trying to do in Kenya was to go there and live among them and show them, just like Jesus did for us. And so that's how come I got the call. I don't know why that God would pick me of all of the people that were more qualified than I am to do this work, but he's took that and he's worked a marvelous work in Kenya, and it's just been really great. And I thank y'all for coming in and inviting me to be on the podcast and giving me this opportunity to share this, that other people can know that there's a place that they can do service. It may not be here. It may be in any part of the world. The lack of knowledge of Jesus Christ and the need for help for these people is not just prevalent in Kenya, but it's prevalent all over the world. And that's kind of how I got called to go there and do this work. And it's been a really great work. Not that I've done anything, but to get to go and be a part of it. Everything that's been done there, God has done. And I tell people that if it's messed up, I did it. But if it's good, God done it.
Mm.
So that's how I got called and got the call to go to Kenya. And then I accepted that call, and we started an NGO in Kenya that's called Rarieta Relief International. And through that NGO, we help widows. We build houses for widows. We work with orphans. We've got a Bible school that teaches pastors the Bible without charge. Everything that we do there, we fund. Well, actually, God funds, but we take the money that He gives us and do these programs. We've got a program for widows that we're just starting up that we feed the orphans on a Saturday for one meal. We furnish them stuff to go to school with, like backpacks, paper, things that they can't afford. You don't realize that you don't think anything about going and buying a 500 rim of paper for a printer. But that paper is the same cost there as it is here. And they make $2 and $2.50, $3 a day. Well, that's a day and a half worth of labor just to buy a pack of school paper. And we try to give them the things they need to go through and get their education. Education is the way out of poverty.
Mm.
And these people, they don't consider themselves in poverty, but in reality, they're in the most desperate of poverty that you can be in. When they start in the morning, it's not about what do they want to do or did they want to go shopping, or they're looking for dinner. And
Mm.
their primary concern for the day is to stay healthy enough to bring in the food that needs to be brought in to feed their family.
Mm.
And by education, they can improve on where they're at and what they do in life, and can more control their destiny than if they didn't have the education.
Leon, how long ago did you first go over there? And when you first went, were you with an organization or did you actually create the organization that you're with now?
We created the organization that we're with now. Uh, we started it from nothing, from just the ministry that we was doing. We filed all the paperwork with the Kenya government because we're there to help the people and to spread the word of God.
Mm.
And
So,
go ahead.
how did you like when you very first went over there? If you weren't with an organization, what kind of contacts did you make, or what was it like just to move to a different country and just start something new?
Well, it was kind of a working time. At first, we just went and done mission trips and started churches. And then, after a while, when I got the call to do this thing, I joined with the Baptist Association, the Madison Chester and Crockett Association of Baptists, and together we formed an NGO in Kenya so that we would be able to work and do this work. And it materialized from that. At first, when we went, we worked through the Kenya Baptist Convention, and then that as we got a little experience, then we kind of went off on our own and started what we felt like needed to be done over there, that God was leading us to do.
I'll tell you something that's amazing, Kevin. Leon, how old were you when you first? I guess when you said, "Hey, I'm moving to Kenya," like how old were you then?
I was about 65.
About 65.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah. And Leon's got. I know Leon and Brenda have children, grandchildren. Um, what was that like? What like was that something that when God said, "Hey, sell all your stuff," and I remember when you did that, by the way, when you sold all your stuff. Um, hey, sell all your stuff and move to Kenya and leave your children and grandchildren in the United States. Was that something that you battled with God with, or was that just an immediate, yes, God, I'm going?
Well, with me, it was more of a, okay, I'm going. With Brenda, it was more of a battle, but it, it's just something you do. I mean, either you're committed to God fully or you're not.
Mm.
You can't be halfway. And so I told God that I would go as long as He paid the bill, that I would go until He was ready for me to quit going.
Mm.
And I don't know, now I've got problems with health, but I'm just praying that soon He'll deal with all of that and I can get back over there and be with that family again. When you're dealing with people that you love, their, their family too.
Mm.
And you miss that family just like you miss the family over here. And I've been going over there for 15 years now. And I've got deep relations over there, just like I have. And probably I've got more friends over there than I've still got left in the U.S. I don't know. But that's part of the hassle that you feel like you're giving up, but you're really not giving up anything. What you're going to get from doing what God wants you to do is far greater than anything you can get from life here on the earth. And that's just how I look at it. Now, Brenda, she developed a heart problem and she quit going with me after a while, and I had to go by myself. And I would stay there for 30 days or for 90 days without her, come back here for 90 days, back over there for 90 days. And I done that for some time until COVID came. And COVID has kind of ripped everything a new one, but still, I'm in communication with them every day. And the structure that we built with the NGO there has carried it forward. And the pastors and the churches that we've started are still growing. They've all got pastors. They're starting churches on their own now. And that's been one of the things that we have worked with from the beginning, was to establish churches that survived past whenever we left. And so by doing that and by teaching the pastors for free, then it has stabilized the church end of the thing. We're still working with orphans. We're still working with widows. Sometimes we go to schools and we furnish sanitary towels to the schoolgirls so that they can stay in school and get an education. The thing with a girl having an education in Kenya is they still do the deal where you pay dowry. A girl that's not educated can only be bought for a couple of sheep or a couple of goats. Or one that is educated will bring 8 to 10 bulls. And that doesn't make sense to us over here. But in reality, if you really consider, then the being a dowry price of 10 bulls from a man means that he's got more to give to that marriage or that communion that they're having. And that's one of the most important things that we do while we're there, is work with the schools. Uh, you can't imagine that a school with 500 students sometimes doesn't even have a soccer ball to practice with. And that's part of the poverty of what goes on there. And we've just worked with programs to try to get them out of that poverty and to be able to make a difference in their lives, uh, that that can be not just for today or tomorrow, or not give you a fish and let you get used to me giving you a fish, but to be able to teach you to fish where you can feed yourself from now on.
One thing I remember, Leon, talking about schools, and I can't remember the name of the village. You may remember, but I remember going to this and guys, our listeners, keep in mind these school buildings are made out of mud and straw with tin roofs, and I remember going there and there was a cistern. So a hole that's dug in the ground where all the rainwater collects, and that's where they get the water to wash their hands, to drink, so forth and so on. And I remember looking at the geography here, and there were cows, you know, pasturing on the school grounds. There were some grave markers there where people have been buried, and I remember thinking, and that water that's collecting in the cistern is running down through all that and collecting in the cistern. And I remember, I'll never forget, Leon and I were talking, and I said, "Man, how much does it cost to dig a well, or to put in a more sanitary cistern?" And Leon told me $100 US. And I remember thinking to myself, "Man, I spend $100 a month at Starbucks, but I can take that $100 and provide clean water to, these 500 students that are, having a drink and wash their hands out of this nasty water in this cistern." And I remember coming home and looking in my closet, at all the clothes that I have and all the shoes that I have, and all this stuff that I've spent countless dollars on, that, man, could have gone so far in a country like Kenya and in Asembo Bay. Do you remember the name of that village?
Yeah, that was St. Joyce School.
That's right. Yeah.
We actually dug a well in a cistern, not a well like we would pump out of, but the old timers well, and diverted the water from the rooftops into that well and put a cover on it so that the water would be not contaminated by what run off of the ground into it.
I tell you what, Kevin, you want to talk about some of the kindest, happiest people in the world that I have ever had the opportunity to come across and meet are the Kenyan people. To live in such poverty and to be so happy with their status is what was amazing to me. Even the churches. I remember the first church that we went to in a village had no roof on it, dirt floors, no roof, and but yet when the people came to worship, it was far more filled with the Holy Spirit than anything I'd ever experienced in the U.S. I even remember a church meeting under a bunch of mango trees, and during the sermon, you'll hear the little cracks, and then you've got to look up and dodge the falling mangoes, falling out of the tree. But yet these people are just rejoicing and happy, and you really see the Holy Spirit move. And then I think back across my childhood and think, man, growing up, we fought about what color the carpet was going to be, or what size the gym was going to be that we were going to build, or, just so superficial things. And I just remember Kenya was just such an eye-opening experience for me, from a faith standpoint. And I know, I actually envy Leon that he gets to experience that day after day.
Yeah. Can we go back and talk about Leon? 65 years old, most men are retiring. They're kind of wrapping it up and kind of settling into the rest of life. But, you felt this call from God to move to a different country. Like, I don't know, just prior to that, what was your relationship with the Lord prior to your call to Kenya?
Well, I had always done World Changers events, like the program that the Baptist had where you go work on people's stuff. I would be a crew chief on that. I've worked construction all my life. And so I was in church, I was active, and it just, I already had a ministry going where we would work on people's stuff around here. If a nice storm come, we would be the first ones there cutting trees. If a tornado come, we would be there. And I already had that going over here with the church where I was at, and it was just it seemed like just the time to transition to something else. Uh, I enjoyed that probably as much as anything I've ever done, except this. And this has been the most rewarding thing
Mm,
that I have ever been a part of,
that's
and
amazing.
I am just a part of it because what goes on there belongs to God
Mm,
and not to me.
mhm.
He just led me for some reason. I keep asking, why did God pick me? And my wife says, because I'm so stubborn that they can't run me off. And,
That's great.
and I'm not sure that's not right, but
What was the first time that you personally remember, like the way you described it, is just falling in love with a people group? So, do you remember the first time that you just realized that you just had a special connection with these people?
yeah, the first time I went, uh, they named me Simba because I've got the whiskers on the side here. I had them a lot bigger than that back then, and that's kind of stuck. I'm known by Simba from Nairobi to Simbo Bay, uh, and that's about 300 miles. But that it was just an affection for the people. Uh, there was not any problem to see the great need. I mean, unless you're blind, you can see the need instantly. Uh, the salary that they make is it's a pitiful salary. Uh, we pay more than most people around. We've got 8 employees over there running our project, and we pay them some more than the rest of the community pays. But if we paid more than that, then the community would be mad at us and we wouldn't be able to do ministry like we need to there.
Hmm.
Uh, and so you get into a lot of things whenever you get into to doing ministry that they hamper what you want to do, but you have to do them
Hmm.
in order to be able to do the ministry you want to do.
Mm.
Um, we've got medical equipment there, and we've been trying to get a medical clinic set up for the last 3 or 4 years. When you deal with the Kenyan government or any foreign government that's third world, uh, it's a slow process. Anything that you're doing has to go through here and has to go through there, and it's just a slow process to get things done. Uh, Sometimes you have to do it in ways you don't really want to,
Mm.
but still, you just have to deal with what's there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something, Kevin, that I think a lot of our listeners can relate to. I'm sure there's many of you guys that in the past or even so currently participate in the Operation Christmas Child program where you pack shoe boxes and they go various places overseas to children. Man, we actually, I think it was the 2012 trip. Um, we actually got to hand those boxes out
Mm.
to
Wow.
children at the orphanage. And man, my little buddy at the orphanage, Moses, um, and they called him Moses because they found him out in the bush.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's right.
Mm.
And man, he clung to me at that orphanage, and I found out two things. He loved every single thing in that shoebox. It didn't matter if it was a toothbrush or a tennis ball, and he loved Pop Tarts. I had a pocket full of Pop Tarts that day, and he loved them. And Leon, you remember this? They kind of telling us what to expect, as we go. And Leon says, "So now listen, a lot of these people in Kenya have never seen anybody with light colored skin, never seen anybody with your type of hair, and so they like to touch you, like to touch your skin, feel of your hair. And he said now Buckley, they're really gonna like you because I had the tattoos. And and what's funny is they would come up and they would try to rub them off. They didn't really understand what the tattoo was.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah. So just a great man, just a great tribe of people over there. Leon or I, neither one, or Brenda can express enough how kind and honest those people were. I'll tell you how kind they are. Every village we went to what, 4 a day?
Yeah.
On average. When you first got there, you had to go into the chief's hut, and they would give everybody in our group a 1 liter bottle of Fanta. And it could have been pineapple or cherry. You just never knew. And it was room temperature. Now keep in mind, room temperature in Kenya is 115 degrees. So it was disrespectful to not sit and drink and finish your bottle of Fanta. And I remember my wife at the time, she would drink a couple of sips and then she'd pass me her bottle. So I ended up drinking about 8 Fantas a day, 8 liters of Fanta a day in Kenya.
It took me 7 years to get them to where they stopped doing that because I tried to explain to them that Americans have all the soda they want to drink. And it's not that they're disrespecting you by not drinking yours, but you need the money that you've bought these with worse than they need the soda. So please stop buying sodas. Yeah. But that would happen at every village, at every church meeting that you was at. They had to feed you after it was over with. And that's something that most missionaries that went didn't necessarily want, but it was disrespectful not to take some. And I'm kind of where I can eat about anything. And they used to say, you're going to die. But I've never had a problem eating their food. There's some places that I really didn't want to eat at, but where it was important for you to keep on with the ministry, you done what you had to do and prayed God would protect you from anything that might be in that food that would be detrimental to you.
Yeah.
What about, I know I've talking to missionaries in the past, when you go into a new people group, there's maybe things that are customs that they, practice that we might not, that may actually even go against biblical principles. I've always been fascinated by how you deal with something like that. How do you teach or train something out of the culture, or do you, are there things like that you've dealt with?
Yeah. And in Kenya, you can have as many wives as you want.
Great example.
and the way that we started training these people that was not the right way was that to be a pastor of a church, you could only have one wife. And if you took another wife, then you had to quit being the pastor of that church. And that's kind of had some impact on that situation. But there's a lot of things that you have to deal with that you have no idea over here. That these things, even that the missionaries that go over there have no idea that what's going on, because they're not going to be there long enough for it to really affect them any. When we went, and we still sometimes go from door to door in evangelism and spread the word from hut to hut. If they have 3 or 4 wives, uh, you don't, and they all decide they want to become Christian, you don't say, okay, you've got to get rid of 2 of these wives or 3 of one of these wives or whatever. Uh, you let God deal with that.
Mm.
Uh, and most of the stuff that they do, uh, we don't try to correct. We try to teach that that's not the way that it should be. And then, I mean, you can't reform a man's brain or a woman's brain and their way of thinking for years and years. You can just teach that that's not the way that it's supposed to be.
Mm.
And hopefully it's going to catch on a little at a time.
Yeah,
And
that's good. I was just talking to someone earlier today about the fact that it's not our job to change people, to change their behaviors or change their heart. That's just God's job. Our job is just to be faithful and obedient to the best that we know. That's good.
yeah, Jesus didn't say to go and save people. He said to go and tell them about me.
Mm.
And I think one of the things that stops people from telling about Jesus is the prefix that they have the mentality that if whoever they're telling about Jesus don't accept Jesus, that's a reflection on them or their ability to tell it. But God says that He gives the increase. He just wants you to tell the story. And whether or not they accept it, that's not up to you or on you or to your cost at all. It's just that you went and told about Jesus to somebody.
Yeah. Leon, one of the things I wanted to kind of get you to touch on tonight was, and I've told Kevin some of this, when I first came, again, I believe it was the first trip, 2012, and we had the tent revivals, or crusades is what we call them over there, crusade. And man, for the first time in my life, I actually witnessed things that you only either read about in the Old Testament or saw on TV, or I'll never forget a Kenyan woman came walking up out of the audience up toward the pastors on crutches, obviously crippled, and for about 10 minutes all these Kenyan pastors and Leon and some of the American pastors are praying over this woman. And Kevin, I kid you not, this woman gets up and walks away without her crutches. And, of course, I'm sitting there as somebody who grew up, in the Western church going, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
And then as if my world couldn't get rocked anymore, this same group of pastors were praying over a man who, Leon, you might be able to describe this better than me, but the only word I can think of is demon possessed.
Yeah, he was.
And just prayed this demon right out of this man. And so these are things that, again, I heard about it, read about it, maybe saw a movie about it, but getting to see that in real life was real eye-opening. But, those are things that the Western church really doesn't teach, really keeps at arm's length. And, I just, Leon, I'd like to hear you maybe talk about some of those experiences and maybe even, hear your thoughts on the Western church and how that needs to be changed, with what's being taught here in America.
Well, you're right. It's not talked about here. Neither is the Holy Spirit talked about here. There's just stuff that's not discussed in these churches that are in America now that needs to be. If God said it once, he said it for eternity. He didn't say it for just one little period of time. And I remember the first trip that I ever made over there. Of course, before I went, God started preparing me. I didn't know why that I was being prepared like I was, but I saw a, a kid that was 6 years old climb the wall backwards and seen demons cast out of him, and that was in the U.S. That wasn't in Kenya. And I was assigned to work on a witch's house, and to deal with the witchcraft. It taught me how to deal with the witchcraft, and God taught me about all of these things before I went. And now the first trip that I made, the last day we was there, we was at the village elder's house, and they had already been saved, and so we didn't spread the gospel there. But he asked that could we pray for his wife, that her shoulder was giving her pain, and she couldn't move her shoulder. And so they asked me if I'd do it, in which I asked him if I could lay my hand on her shoulder. And so I laid my hand on her and I touched her and prayed that she be healed. And as soon as I said amen, she started wringing her arm and just smiling up a storm. And I had fell 20 feet and tore the ligaments in my shoulder. And I was praying for her with my shoulder killing me, and hers gets healed and mine don't. and I think, God, this ain't really right. But I went through that time. We had several times that we had to cast demons out. There's witches all around where we're at. They've never bothered me. I know most of them. I know most of their histories. A friend of mine got a text from a guy that said Leon must be a very strong guy, because I know every witch at the Simbo Bays tried to put a cast on him and cast a spell on him, and they ain't got him out yet. So it's just stuff there it's here, but you don't see it here like you do over there. It's almost like it's out in the open there, and there's times that I've had to pray healing for people, and they would be healed, and over here, if somebody wants you to pray for their healing, they want you to pray that the doctor does a good job. Well, over there, it's not like that. They can't afford to go to the doctor much, and they're looking straight to God for the healing when you pray for them. And it's just a different world over there. You have problems over here just sitting at church and listening to a 30-minute sermon. We're over there, church may last 2 hours and a half. When I preach over there, I may not get to start till 12:30. And then if you preach less than an hour and 15 minutes, somebody else will get up and take over.
Hey, and Kevin, listen, you can, there could be 20 people there, everybody within earshot of you, but every single time a Kenyan's going to bring out a PA system.
Yeah, they're going to have a PA
We
system,
used to laugh.
and then they're going to pop the speaker like that, make sure that it works when they switch it, give it to you. But it's just a different world there, and he's right. There's so many things that need to be taught in churches over here that are just not taught. They're not talked about. Hell's one of them. And I don't know how things are going to work, but I know that God holds everybody responsible for what their actions are, and for the people that are teaching the wrong thing here. they're going to stand in judgment someday, and I don't want to be one of them people. So I pray that God not allow me to teach anybody a lie, and that's the best prayer I've got going.
Hey, Kevin, one more funny story before we close things up here. And Leon, if you remember this story, I want you to tell it. The story about the funeral. You remember that? You know what story I'm talking about? The next morning, I come to you and asked you what was all that racket
Oh,
going
the
on.
noise. Yeah, and in Kenya, it cost close to $1,000 to bury somebody if they're not important. But if they're important, it costs more than that. Well, the family usually doesn't have that much money, so they go and they kill a bull, and they prepare that bull, and people come to their house to party every night for at least 2 weeks, and they play the music really loud. And I accuse them of taking the bull and bleeding the blood out of it and sacrificing it to the devil around behind the back of the house after it gets dark, and then getting every preacher they can to come say something good about whoever it was. And that is to some extent the way that it goes in some people's lives. I had a pastor that I was flying with one time that was going to bury his his brother, and he said, I said, do y'all still bleed the bull and use the blood to sacrifice to the devil at night? And he said, yep, they still do that. But said, I told my daddy, he takes care of that end of it. I'm not having nothing to do with that. I'm just going to take care of the right end.
We've been hearing that uh, a few nights. I mean, all night long, and of course we're exhausted. You know, jet lag on top of everything else. And I asked Leon one morning. I said, Leon, what is going on with that? And he tells me the story he just told about. They need money to bury, and I get my checkbook out, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "How much do they need to shut up? Because I need to sleep."
But they don't quit. I mean,
Yeah.
it just now they have changed some of the laws, and they can't play the music hardly as loud. And since COVID, they've only had about 3 days to bury people. But I haven't been there since then. But that was one of the Lord. It was one of the most irritating things that was that to listen to, and they would start about dark, and they didn't quit till 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And it was it's a weird custom. Of course, they've got a lot of customs that are weird like that. They've got used to they would bury their people setting up, where they could go back and communicate with them and talk to them
Wow.
and see how the future was going to be. They still do some of the communicating using necromancers for that, but that's not near as prevalent as it used to be.
Well, Leon, I know that guys. Leon's obviously here in the U.S. I'm not in Kenya right now, but and a lot of that's due. I know Leon's had some health issues. Miss Brenda's had some, and of course, COVID. There's lots of travel restrictions, things like that. So, but Leon's still called to Kenya. He's still called to the mission. So, you guys can see down in the bottom corner down there, AsimboBay.org. If you guys are interested in, financially supporting Leon and what he's doing over in Kenya, that's the place you can go and do that. And I know he would greatly appreciate it, and the people of Kenya most certainly would. Kevin, you got anything before we close out? Any last words or questions?
Man, I
Now,
just want to go ahead.
on what he just said, all the money that's donated to Assemble Bay is used for Assemble Bay. I don't draw a penny.
Well,
I live off of Social Security,
well,
and so if you want to make a donation, then all of that money will be used for the programs that we've got going on there. None of it is used to pay me or any of the other people that are on the board. And we do have 8 employees that we're paying to work over there and to run it, and they're doing an excellent job right now. So I'll let you have it now, and I appreciate y'all letting me talk and share part of the story.
that's awesome, Leon. I
My
want
life.
to. That's awesome, Leon. I just want to say thank you so much for, you had every reason to say no when you heard God calling you, to Africa. I'm still blown away that, at the age that most people settle down and want to just take it easy the rest of their life, you just kicked it into high gear and said yes and went over to a place you didn't know in the midst of a people you didn't know and a culture you didn't know, and just have done everything you can just to take the gospel there. I mean, that's a story of biblical proportion. So thank you so much, on behalf of just the kingdom of God. Thank you for saying yes to Jesus. And I know we'll be able to have fun with a whole slew of people in eternity that we wouldn't otherwise have even been able to experience. So thank you so much
That's
for that.
true.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll be 78 in April, and I'd go back tomorrow if I could.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Hey, we're going to start calling him the Social Security preacher. You got machine gun preacher. You can be the Social Security preacher. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to this episode of the Kingdom Effect. Again, thank you, Leon, Brenda, for having us in your home. Leon, thank you for all that you do. Miss Brenda for supporting Leon through all that he does. And listeners, thank you for supporting us, listening to the podcast. Remember to like and share this podcast, and also remember that the audio version will be released tomorrow morning on all major podcast formats. We'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks for joining us here at the Kingdom Effect.